Macadamia is a woody plant seed originating from Australia. Macadamia was first grown in trials in the 2000s in the central highlands of Vietnam, and Đắk Nông was the first province to make planning for growing this plant. Science shows that benefits from growing macadamia is 2 times higher than growing tea and 3 times higher than growing coffee. Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development and many investors have encouraged farmers to grow this type of tree in northwestern areas of Vietnam, including Điện Biên and Sơn La provinces.
Greetings from Trang Vietnam on VTC10 Net Việt. Macadamia is the new type of tree in Vietnam. Along with the opportunities comes the challenges for developing this type of tree in Vietnam nowadays. In today's program, we have a conversation with Mr. Nick Austin, the CEO of Asia, to understand more about how to grow macadamia in Vietnam. Thank you very much, Mr. Nick Austin, for joining our program today.
Yes, certainly, thank you.
Macadamia comes from Australia, and recently Asia has sent macadamia experts to a workshop in Vietnam recently. Could you please share more with us your understanding about how it has been grown in Vietnam these days?
And you're right, the workshop that ACR supported recently, I think, was an important opportunity to look at experiences from Australia in macadamias and respond to a priority that was given to us from Vietnam, saying, could we identify some experts? So we identified a commercial macadamia grower and the head of the Australian Macadamia Society, which is a peak industry group, to come to Vietnam and meet with key partners, but also to visit some of the existing macadamia plantations. So in Australia, the macadamia industry has been developing over the last 20 years or so, and I think there are real opportunities to draw on the experiences and, if you like, learn from the mistakes in the Australian industry, so that as the Vietnamese macadamia industry grows, that we're not repeating the same mistakes, we're making new mistakes, if you like.
Central Highland in Vietnam and some other provinces in the north of Vietnam, including Điện Biên and Sơn La, are considered the cultivable land for growing macadamia. What are the similarities and the differences between these provinces and those in Australia?
It's a good question, and I think it's important that we recognise at a large scale there is potentially significant areas of land. The study that we're referring to identified potentially in the order of 200,000 hectares. But when you actually look down in a more granular nature, in a finer detail, you find that perhaps not all of those areas are suitable. And one of the important things to think of is drainage, for example. So from the experience in Australia, having good mapping of drainage from land is important. One of the characteristics of Australian macadamia country that mirrors that here in Vietnam is it's typically steeper slopes, and these slopes can be prone to erosion. So it's important to identify drainage plans and erosion management approaches so that as the industries develop, the natural resource base is managed appropriately so that the soil maintains its fertility and so there's not runoff of soil into waterways. That's important for the environment, but it's also important for the production of the macadamias themselves that depend on a fertile soil.
If grown in Vietnam, what benefits will macadamia bring to Vietnam's agriculture and economy?
Macadamias are a high-value crop, and I think all countries, Australia included, is looking to increasingly move their agricultural production out of bulk commodities. In Australia, the big commodities like wheat and cotton and dairy and beef are big export earners, but the high value comes from many of the horticultural crops, and so macadamias present an opportunity for high value exports. but it comes down to targeting the right quality specifications for the right markets and ensuring a consistent supply to meet those specifications.
Statistics from the Forest Inventory and Planning Institute indicates that there are currently a large number of macadamia growing projects in Vietnam. Specifically, there are 3 projects in Điện Biên and Lai Châu provinces, 10 projects in Sơn La province, and 45 projects in the Central Highlands. Lâm Đồng province has 25 projects.
Gia đình cũng cứ mạnh dạn làm thôi, cũng không biết thế nào. Cho nên là cho đến lúc mà đến năm thứ 4 thì thấy có bói, và đến năm nay, mấy năm nay thì thấy là về cái cây này thấy hiệu quả, lên mạng thì thấy là cả nước mình bây giờ đang phát triển, nhất là trong vùng Tây Nguyên.
In the face of the ever-increasing number of macadamia growing projects, apart from orientating farmers how to develop this type of tree, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development has assigned Forest Inventory and Planning Institute to complete a comprehensive plan to match demand with supply of macadamia in domestic and international markets. This plan must sync with the production of all the commodities. Accordingly, Forest Inventory and Planning Institute is expected to announce its reports in this August.
Cây maca là cây có sản lượng cũng như là có cái chất lượng rất là khá và có tiềm năng rất là cao. Thế nhưng mà khuyến cáo không phải là trồng tràn lan, mà chỉ là trồng những nơi đất tốt và phù hợp khí hậu, và nông dân là phải có cái gọi là cái điều kiện kinh tế thì mới làm được cái cây này. Thế nhưng mà gần đây tôi thấy nó phát triển ào quá. Thế và hiện nay ở Úc thì đúng là đầu ra của họ cũng rất là khá. Thế nhưng mà cái công nghệ chế biến cũng như cái thời gian để mà thu hoạch là rất là cao. Đây cũng là một cái thách thức đối với nông dân Việt Nam. Cho nên là vừa rồi mà nếu mà nông dân có một cái tự phát trồng như thế thì cho nên là đây là vấn đề mà tôi nghĩ là ngành nông nghiệp là phải quan tâm hơn.
In fact, there are different attitudes towards growing this type of tree in Vietnam. In the difficult context of growing coffee, rubber, and other products, a large number of farmers turn to macadamia and hope to make a change in their life. To prevent an explosive plantation of macadamia and to have farmers sell their products, Vietnamese authorities have made some concrete recommendations on how to grow this type of tree in Vietnam.
Quy hoạch hàng hóa phải đi liền với nó là quy hoạch về chế biến, quy hoạch về đảm bảo cái nguồn giống, quy hoạch về đảm bảo cái thị trường. Cuối cùng là làm sao để cái cây trồng này nó có hiệu quả cao hơn so với những cây trồng trên cùng diện tích với lợi thế so sánh phải rõ ràng, và làm sao người dân phải có lợi nhất.
Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development tries to do research and make plans on growing macadamia in Vietnam. They plan to allow the growing of only 10,000 hectares of macadamia by 2020 in the Central Highlands and northwest of Vietnam.
Although Vietnam can benefit from growing macadamia, many people have different attitudes toward growing macadamia in Vietnam. In your opinion, what are the difficulties in growing macadamia in Vietnam, especially in terms of techniques?
I think right from the design, as I talked about, it's important that the right land is selected, the right conditions, and then that the right planting material, the appropriate planting material. Australia's macadamia industry has been investing in research that supports the industry's development since the early 1990s, and that research has helped them to overcome some of the obstacles to production. It's a case of getting the right research to overcome the challenges, because while we can draw on experience from Australia or from China or from the US where macadamias are grown, there are going to be unique challenges in Vietnam. And so the research needs to help overcome those challenges. The right planting material, the right grafting, scions. Important to keep records of what's planted where. Macadamia is an investment over a long term, so investing up front in getting the right decisions, the right material, is going to pay off long term.
It is said farmers may devalue the production of cashew and coffee if they grow macadamia. In your opinion, how can we both develop a new type of tree and maintain the traditional trees?
Recognising that macadamias, in terms of traded nuts globally, represent less than 1% of nut trade. It's very small, it's quite niche. The bigger challenge may well be around not expanding at a rate that the demand where the demand is misaligned. I think that potentially there are opportunities for synergies between those industries, and I think that comes back to the sort of capacities to support them, the market change, the companies that are going to increasingly be playing a part in getting that production to higher value markets. And so there's actually complementarities and synergies between these, less than there is competition if managed well and if the right planning is in place. Essentially a really important opportunity, and I say it's an opportunity for economic development to increase incomes, particularly for smallholder farmers. And so it's important that the appropriate levels of support and the right policy settings are in place to allow that to happen in a way that brings benefits, particularly to smallholder farmers, to engage in that new market opportunity.
From the pros and cons in growing macadamia in Vietnam, what should the government of Vietnam do in order to ensure the sustainable development of this new type of tree in Vietnam?
Policy settings are very important, and they need to be well thought through, of course. Subsidies do play a role, but targeting subsidies appropriately in ways that will support the long-term industry development and to guard against boom and bust cycles of big investments and then falls in prices. So there's very definitely an important role that conducive policies can play in assisting in trade, and also importantly roles where phytosanitary considerations that government can support the quality pest and disease management and specifications for markets. So those broader policy settings and the way in which the industry can respond are important considerations for government. There are experiences again in Australia that could be valuable to contrast as to what has worked and hasn't. We recognise very different contexts, but it's still valuable to share experiences. And the Australian industry also stands to gain from Vietnam's experiences as well, as the macadamia industry continues to develop here in Vietnam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nick Austin, for joining our program today.
Thank you, a real pleasure.
With that, we have to wrap up our program for today. For comment and feedback, don't hesitate to write to us at shangvietnam@netvietTV.net. We hope that through this program, you have more understanding of how to grow macadamia in Vietnam. Once again, thank you for watching and goodbye for now.